All right. I believe we are up and running now. I'm just checking on a few things. Make sure you all can see all my stuff okay. Perfect. All right, so hi everybody. My name is Malika Friedman. I am the Graduate Extension Assistant for the Hill Library Makerspace. I'm also a fourth-year PhD candidate in the Communication Rhetoric and Digital Media program here at State. So if you have any questions about grad school, we can talk about that. But mainly I'm here to talk to you all about painting in general. So we're going to be doing our painting kits. So what a few people have already know, but not everyone I suppose knows, is that we have asynchronous kits in the makerspace where you can kind of pick up a kit. It'll come in like a little envelope that looks like this. So if you look on your screen, you can see it like there. And then with the QR code, you're able to go ahead and scan it. And that way it goes ahead and it puts you into a Moodle Wolfware space where you can go ahead and learn about a particular thing. So for instance, this is our painting one, which is pretty fun. It comes with a paint by numbers kit, which I'll walk you all through how to use. We'll talk about painting a little bit and some fun techniques. And then if we have time, I can even show you how to do something that's like not necessarily painting on here, but painting on like a 3D printed object, which I ended up bringing with me from one of the many that I just need to paint. But yeah, just to get started, a lot of cool things come with the kit. So you get this printout, like I mentioned. You get 2 brushes, you get acrylic paint, you get a little palette, which are really, really nice. If you've ever done any kind of painting before, palettes are great for stuff like that. Now, the things that you do need to kind of keep in mind when you are doing any kind of painting is you need to have a water source. So as you can see on here, I do have a little water. I keep mine in a little jar, just like this. I find that works well for just kind of containing water, particularly if you're in a space where you need to make sure that your liquid stays pretty solid. This is just an old canning jar I had. And then some kind of paper towel. Painting just gets messy, unfortunately, just a lot of the time when it comes to things like that. But the acrylic paint is really good. It's very versatile compared to a lot of other paints. So for instance, if you have things like watercolor paint, you need to have very specific types of paper. So the paper that you get in these kits is a mixed media paper. So what that means is kind of what it sounds like is media. You can use a lot of different types of mediums on there. You can use watercolor, you can use acrylic paint, other things like that. Watercolor, specifically the paper that you have to use, oftentimes you have to go through a process of getting it wet. You have to kind of stick it down, you have to tape it down. Basically it becomes one of those things where a lot of prep work goes into it to make sure it works. And oftentimes that's because with watercolor, because of the name kind of like water itself, when a watercolor painting dries, oftentimes, and you might even notice this with regular painting that you've done, is that when it dries it becomes like wavy or like crispy, and so that's why you kind of have to do like a weird stretching out and using something like tape in order to hold down like watercolor paper. The paper in here, like I said though, is not watercolor paper, it is mixed media paper, which works well with a lot of different types of mediums, particularly like if you like to do something like you want to paint but you also kind of want to draw with like a pen. So I know that's very popular to have like, you'll like paint out like kind of the background and then you'll draw on it with pen. And that way it's a pretty good medium for both of those. So you don't have to worry about it too much. But it's pretty nice to have, especially when it comes to acrylic painting. Acrylic painting is very versatile. I like it because it's forgiving. I feel like sometimes when I do like art, I make a lot of mistakes. And so watercolor paint, it's really hard to kind of make mistakes with watercolor and be able to correct them because of just the nature of that type of painting. With acrylic paint though, if I mess up, I gotta just paint over it. And I can paint over it in a way that I don't have to necessarily paint a lot on it, if that makes sense. So I can go ahead and just paint a little and it works pretty well, but I don't have to worry about it too much. Another thing that kind of helps as well is if you get paint on yourself, it comes off pretty easily, pretty quickly. If it doesn't, there's like a few methods to kind of get it off. So for instance, if you are getting it on your clothing, you can use like rubbing alcohol to get acrylic paint off. Again, this is going to depend on like what you're wearing, because that might end up damaging if you're wearing something like a silk shirt or something, that might end up damaging it. Versus if you have something like, let's see, what kind of paint? Malaka is not too bad to get off, but other types of paint might be a little bit more difficult. Like once it's on your clothing, it kind of stinks, which is actually why I'm wearing black today, because if I get paint on myself, it's not a big deal. It is perfectly fine, and I am totally fine with that. But with that, another nice thing is acrylic paint is going to dry really, really quickly. It's going to dry very nicely, which is good. So if I do something like this, which is when I'm going to do the paint by numbers, it's going to go along pretty quickly. I'm not going to have to worry about it. That being said, it does mean that like for things like with your paint containers, if you leave them open, it is going to dry. So some people will actually do things where like if they have their palette and they leave their paint on, they actually won't clean off their palette. They'll just kind of peel back the layer of paint, and that sometimes is a very satisfying feeling to have whenever you are removing acrylic paint. You can also do things like if you're painting and you want to make sure it's protective, you can do like a varnish over it to go ahead and protect it. But the nice thing is, like I said, acrylic paint, it's really good. It works for a lot of different types of surfaces. So one of the things I'm going to go ahead and talk to you about is like different types of techniques when it comes to painting itself. So in particular, I'm going to go ahead and just show you like a few on here. So with acrylic paint, we can get a lot of different types of images done. So for instance, we can do dry on dry to get very high, vibrant colors. We can go through a method called glazing, which is putting down one color and then going over with another. And glazing, and I would say wet on wet, when you do things like this, it helps to kind of create a watercolor effect. So sometimes you can use acrylic paint to kind of create the illusion that you're painting with watercolors, or to change like the way that it works. Graffito, which I do not speak Italian, so if I mispronounce that, someone can let me know in chat about that. Basically what that is though is you're painting one color, you paint over it, and then you use something like an etching to go ahead and get it, like you can etch like things out of it to create like that type of effect. Stippling is like making little tiny dots with your paint. So I would be using something like this brush in order to get a stippling effect. This is, for stippling is also kind of similar to a method of painting that's called pointillism. And with pointillism, it's kind of what it sounds like, is you're making different different points or like dots that connect together in order to create like a picture. So there's a lot of different famous artists who are known for doing things like pointillism. It's a pretty good method. And then splattering, which is a fun one, it's just my favorite, is you literally are splattering. So to kind of give you an idea, I have some scrap right here. We can go ahead and take a look at kind of like how to do these different methods. I'm gonna go ahead and just do my stuff real quick. Set it down so we feel good to go. Now you may notice too that I am painting over a cardboard, and I'm doing that because I want to protect the table. But sometimes you want to make sure that you're painting over something like, sometimes people will use newspapers, very common I feel like, or they'll lay something down or have like a palette or an easel. I just stuck this onto cardboard just because it will be a little bit more protective for me. So we'll go ahead and just use this brush to go ahead and get it. And you know what? We'll go ahead and use red. So first method, and there are a lot of different types of painting methods. These are just kind of 6 that I want to focus on. The first I can do is what's called dry on dry, meaning that this is a dry surface. This the mixed media paper that I'm using right now is dry. So what I can do is I can go ahead, just get dry paint directly. And when I go like this, we can see that it's very vibrant. And it's very visible. Versus if I did something such as wet on wet. So I'm going to go ahead and use my other brush to create a little wet area down below. And if I do something using wet, and I'm going to use my palette over here to kind of help with that and get some water going. So we can always see like this is already kind of getting lighter. It's almost looking like a pink color. It's quite pretty. And I can kind of see and feel where that is. So see how I do that, and it almost like washes it out a little bit. And almost in a weird way, right now in this light, it kind of looks pink to me. I don't know if it looks pink to anybody else. but you can just see the different contrasts and the different methods you can kind of get. And that's the really nice thing when you are painting and you can try these different methods, is you can have just with one kind of set of paints, just through different methods, you can go ahead and do a bunch, and different types of things will happen. Then I'm going to go ahead, wash my brush, and I like having my paper towel nearby, like I said, just to go ahead and dab at it. I'm actually going to go ahead and paint down my other color for my glazing effect. And glazing is using water to kind of thin it out too. So I'm going to do that in my little palette right over here. Palettes are great for mixing, particularly if I was trying to do something like trying to get different colors. So if anyone's ever taken an art class before, you might be familiar with something like color theory, and you might have had to do that one assignment where it's not like a doom assignment. I guess I should be very clear, but it is the type of assignment where you have to kind of know color theory and the way that works. So you have to, oftentimes you're given primary colors. So in this case, it would be red, yellow, blue, and from red, yellow, blue, you have to go and make all the colors in like a color wheel. And that's how you know certain things. Like, so for instance, let's say on top of this, I wanted to do purple. The way I know how to do that through my color wheel is I know that I need a little bit of red, and I know I need a little bit of blue to do that. See? And I know that makes purple. I also know that colors that are opposite on the color wheel are what's called complementary. So for instance, what's complementary to purple is green. It's opposite on the color wheel. So sometimes if I wanted to combine purple and green together, it'd be to a very pleasing effect, just because they are complementary, and that goes ahead and works. I can also do things like different shades of like monochrome. So if I wanted to go ahead and make this lighter, I could. For me, I could just use white to do that, which I can totally do right now. Or I can use different other colors as well, like I can use yellow, things like that. I don't want to do that. But now I have like this nice kind of purple, and I could alter it too. So like looking at this purple, it does look a little dark to me. So what I can do is take a little bit more of my red and combine it in there. There we go. And this kind of affects the color that I'm wanting to get out of it. And then with glazing this over, I'm just going to do a little bit of water again, because glazing is all about like kind of what it sounds like a glaze. You're using water to kind of thin out the paint, because acrylic paint is rather thick, and then that way I can kind of have an effect where I'm like, ooh, actually I should thin that out even a little bit more with water. It's alright, I have a lot of water with me, so this works out. And that way we can kind of see it. And this is actually interesting that I ended up choosing yellow now that I think about it, because if I remember correctly, purple and yellow together make gray. So you can still see the yellow underneath. At least I believe you can. Yeah, cool. I like to check just in case, because sometimes what looks right on my screen is not necessarily what's going to look right on yours. Yeah, so you can see the yellow, you can see the purple in it. I'm gonna go ahead, wash my brush. Cool. And then the next one we're gonna do is Graffito. Again, I do not speak Italian. Fortunately, I decided to, when it came to language requirements, I ended up going with Spanish, which to some extent, Spanish and Italian do have similar root words, which is a possibility. And I'm going to go ahead, let's do green. We haven't really done anything with green. So I'm going to paint this down. So that's going to make up our background. And if I'm wanting a color to go over it, let's go with blue. We can do blue. Just washing my brush a little bit. And typically when you are doing a method like this, you do want to do it while things are relatively wet. just for the scratching in, because if it's dry, it's going to be a harder time. So I can cover this up. You can even see a little bit of the green still. And just for my scratching, what I'm going to end up doing is using actually like the tip of this. Oftentimes you can use something like a pencil. That works pretty well. But I can just go ahead, go like that. And look, I've got a little smiley face. There he is. And that way you can see the green that's happening underneath with that. All right, and I'm actually going to switch to this brush for our stippling. Now when it comes to stippling, like I said before, typically you're using the ends of a paintbrush to go ahead and do. So having a pointed brush like this is going to work really well for doing this. So let's go ahead. What's the color we haven't used? We could make a color. That's always a possibility for me to do. Trying to think, what color would I want to make that we don't have? We could do orange. That might be fun. So orange is actually kind of easy though, in terms of getting that color. It's usually yellow and red together. And I can tell from this I have too much red, so I want to go for a little bit more yellow. This is the nice thing about knowing kind of color theory is, especially if you have limited paints, because sometimes this is a question I get is sometimes when people are starting off with painting, they're like, you know, I don't want to go through like buying a bunch of colors or the exact colors I need, especially if you're buying like big jugs of paint, and they're like kind of like, how do I get all the colors I need? And I'm like, well, if you just go for your primaries and you have enough, you can have the effect of basically creating your own colors, because like I said, in the kit it comes with these colors, but I just made purple and orange even though that doesn't come in the kit. And that's a very easy thing to do. And then with stippling, it's just little tiny dots. And I actually kind of like stippling. It reminds me, like I said, of pointillism, which I actually used to do a lot of paintings with. I would do a lot of landscapes, and I would hide what's called a blue dog, which is a painting character from George Rodriguez, that's based off a cat, I believe it's called a Cataloo hound from New Orleans. So if you ever look that up, or if you ever go to New Orleans or Louisiana, he's a Louisiana artist, so he tends to do a lot of things like from the bayou and stuff. But one of the characters, one of the things that he tends to paint is this dog that's bright blue, and it's based off of like a myth, but also his own dog he had, which I believe was kind of like a corgi, but it was a black and white corgi. But if you go down to some of the museums in New Orleans, you can see the blue dog basically everywhere. So if you go down to New Orleans and you see a blue dog, you now know why. It's because it's a well-known figure in painting. But anyway, I would used to hide blue dog paintings whenever I would do pointillism, just because I thought it was funny of, here's a bunch of dots and then here's a tiny little blue dog in the middle of all this. All right, so we can see these little points happening. And something that I'm going to do is I'm going to actually kind of water this down a little bit too, just so that way we can also go ahead and get that effect. Let's see, we might need just a titch more. Yeah, and you can see how that changes just a little. It's not as vibrant, but it does give like more of like a watercolor kind of aspect to everything. Cool. And the thing that I would actually do whenever I was doing like pointillism is I actually had I would combine different colors. So I would take like a red, or I would take like yellow and say like a little bit of green, and I would combine them together like that, so they would have like different colors. And create that as an effect. So I believe you can see that in camera, just in case, because this paper is not attached. I can hold it up a little bit more so you can all see it a little easier. There we go. And then the last one I'm going to do is splattering. I'm going to do it very carefully. Oftentimes, splattering is fun. It is incredibly messy because you are going to have to end up using water. And that is something we are just going to be kind of careful of. So I feel like that's kind of like the image that a lot of people sometimes think when they think of like art and artists. It's like kind of like almost like slapping paint on the canvas, like using a brush or something. Because I think that kind of goes with the nature of thinking like, oh, art painting is a little bit chaotic. That being said, you have some people like, what is his name? Let me look it up real quick. There was a film made about this one particular boxer, and I believe he is still alive. It was a very good film. Yeah, Cutie and the Boxer. So Cutie and the Boxer, if you've ever seen it, it came out in 2013, so almost 10 years. Ah, it's the moment where you look up a movie and you're like, oh, this is how long ago it came out. Cool, cool, cool. It's her husband, Ushio, and Noriko. And I believe they're both Japanese born, but I believe they live in New York. I could be wrong about living in New York. No, I think they're still, nope, they're still in Japan, I think. But Ushio is well known for doing, he wears like boxing gloves, and he'll like, will punch at like canvas and like paint in order, and that's kind of like, they're like a painting couple duo. It's very cute. And he'll punch at like paint, and that's like his way of kind of creating it. So paint can be very messy in that way, but it can also be really fun. It's a really good documentary if anybody wants to check it out. I'm not going to punch my canvas. I'm just going to smooth across it. But, so for instance, I have like a little bit of paint here. We're going to try to be careful. I'm going to use my hand so it's going to look like I'm blocking periodically. I'm literally just trying not to get paint everywhere when I do this. So what you're going to do, I have my brush is wet. I'm pulling back on my thumb. So let me move that up so you can kind of see it like that. And I'm doing a flicking motion. Like I said, it looks like I'm covering it. And I am, because I'd rather get this on me than I'd rather get this all over on the tables. But you can kind of see the splatter that's happening right here. And this could be really cool if, like, say I'm trying to do something like, let's say I'm painting a water scene. And I kind of want to convey, like, the image of water. And I kind of want to have, like, motion to it. This is one way I can go ahead and do that. And I could also do something like watering this down a little to create like the illusion of like almost like water spray. Take a little bit of white when I do this. And then if I do something like this and I have this on top of the spray, it adds like a new dimension into the paint that I'm doing. I'm also doing some things like I just painted on dry, but I'm going back with wet. This is the thing I was mentioning earlier about like acrylic paint being very versatile in this way. I'm able to just go back and kind of do things like this, and it's fine, just because of the nature of acrylic paint. Well, thank you. Oh, save the bees. So, like I said, it's going to look like I'm covering it. I'm really not trying to hide what I'm doing here. I'm just trying to protect things. Which is kind of the nature of painting, is like, how do I do this without getting paint on me? Especially in kind of art. Like even prepping stuff today, I got paint on me. There we go. So see, like that spray is coming out a little bit more. So I can do that again. Or if I wanted to, I could even like combine it with some purple. Let's say I want some dimension. I think there's this idea that like if you're painting different things, like if you're doing like water or something, use different colors, use purple, pinks. Try and replicate sunsets. Granted, there's also other methods you could do as well. So for instance, I know this is a popular watercolor one, is people use things like rubbing cement. And so if you plan out where your painting is, you can put rubbing cement down, let that dry, and then paint over it. And this is particularly done and it's useful, I would say more for watercolor. It can also work for acrylic paint because you're trying to have something be white or like a lighter color. So sometimes what people will do, like they'll go down and they'll paint something. So let's say I really wanted to preserve this pink color, but I knew I was going to be painting with additional darker colors. I might put rubber cement on this, and then afterwards I would just rub it off, and that way it would preserve that pink color. So I've done that before where I was painting like I was painting like a sunset over like a pier, and what I knew I wanted to do was I didn't want to directly like paint like the sun, but I wanted the sun to kind of be peeking out through some clouds that I was going to be doing. And so I kind of guesstimated an area, put down some rubber cement on top of some yellow to preserve it, and then I continued painting with different colors all over it just to kind of go ahead and have it. But yeah. And see, that does like a really cool effect. Like it looks like it would be like a water spray or something like that. So it'd be a pretty cool effect to have with that. Cool. So these, like I said, these are just like 6 different techniques. There are so many other techniques that you can use. I like pointing these out just because they're fun. And then also when you are painting, especially when you put that over to something like a painting kit, like a paint by numbers, we can use all these techniques when we go into the paint by colors kit if we say want it to look a little bit differently. So let me go ahead and put this guy aside very carefully so that way he dries. Because for instance, with this paint by colors kit, and I can hold it up so it's a little more apparent, if we were just to paint this dry on dry, it would look like that, which is very cool. I still like it. However, let's say if I wanted to go ahead and have some different variety with it, I can use any of the techniques that we just went over and apply it to this. I can also change it up. So I have my color key right over here with my numbers kind of set. So this is a really good way if you've never painted before to kind of have like a good introduction to it. And then my kind of, whatchamacallit, the way that I paint, I actually go for my lighter colors and I put my lighter colors down first. Reason being is, oh, thank you. Reason being is when I put down lighter colors, they're easier to go over with a darker color than if I were to do that vice versa. Like, so let's say that I was like, you know what, I'm gonna put down blue, but now I need to do yellow. I would have to wait for acrylic paint. I would have to wait for that blue to dry a little bit more before I could then do yellow, and it might take a few more coats. So I tend to do my lighter colors first. So yellow is going to be my first color. And the nice thing with this is I can go right in. I'm going to do this first one dry on dry like I mentioned before. And that one is going to be, I believe it's 3 for me. Yeah. And I'm going to use my thin brush right now to go in and kind of trace the outlines of it. Cool. The pointed brush helps too with getting like certain edges, but like also at the same time, if you go over the lines, no one's gonna know. No one's gonna be able to tell. That's the nice thing with paint by numbers is at the end of the day, no one's gonna really know you went exactly over the lines. And like I said, acrylic paint is really forgiving. So we can always come back later for touch-ups, work on things like that. It's actually kind of weird with a lot of, when you learn like a lot of painting things and you're kind of getting used to them for the first time, it translates into a lot of different areas. So for instance, when I first started learning how to do like makeup and things like that, I was always kind of told to do your lighter base first, and then go in with your darker base and then kind of blend into that. And it's kind of weird how that seems very similar to painting sometimes. But also just other things too, like pastels, stuff like that. There we go. You're gonna notice there's some small ones in here too, like 6 and stuff, and that's fine. Where are my other 3s? Now I feel like I'm slightly, some people have different opinions on this of just going by the numbers and not looking at what the final product is. I will say if you're NC State student, staff, or faculty, and you do decide to pick up one of these kits and do them by yourself, you can look at the image. The image is intentionally in the Moodle page. It's not printed in the kit for you. So if you wanted to be like, you know what, I want to be surprised what this looks like, that is perfectly fine. I will not stop you. No one will stop you from not looking. But it is available only online for that. So that way you have that freedom. Because sometimes people like being surprised by what it is. Although, this particular wolf actually, this actual design of it was done in a few different ways. It actually has a very intricate design. It was done by a library staff member named Jordan, and she did an awesome job. If anyone is an NC State student, sometimes during finals or midterms, we have a, we have like a color wall. And you may notice that this wolf looks similar to that, and that's because it is the same wolf. It's just done slightly differently and painted a little differently. But Jordan's done some really cool work with that. I believe I have her mentioned on the Moodle page too. So in case you ever run into Jordan in the libraries, you're like, hey, I know that you can do art and you're very good at it. Thank you. I'm just doing this slightly. Let's see. Painting is really nice though. I personally like it compared to other mediums that can be a little bit more difficult. I've done a few, so I've done, what was it? The one that's kind of tricky is oil painting. Oil painting is just tricky just for a lot of different reasons. Mainly because, so oil paint can be forgiving. If you get it on your clothes though, I've always been taught that you're going to have a lot more trouble getting it off your clothes than say acrylic paint. Watercolor paint varies a little bit, but oil paint does. That's not to say you can't overlap with your different types of like mediums that you choose to use. You can definitely do that. That one's a little bit more tricky. I actually, weirdly enough, used to really hate watercolor painting. And I think that was just because, so see, for something like this, I can just pop this open and we can just go. And we're like, yeah, we're fine. We're doing right now dry on dry. And that's totally fine. It's working perfectly. But with watercolor, the way you do it and the way that you have to prep for it is completely different. You have to make sure the paper's good. You got to make sure that you have a good water source. Sometimes what you'll see sold are like these little, almost like little watercolor kits that you can buy, and they like come in little travel pouches, which are very cute. And some people will go and just like watercolor in these little cute little notebooks, and they're fine. I can always tell when someone's doing one of those and they have like a watercolor booklet, because that's the thing I was saying before, where like with watercolor, oftentimes you have to tape it down and like have it stretched out because it's introducing more water into the paper and the paper is absorbing it. So when it dries, it's crinkling up. So you can kind of tell when somebody is like a painter and they have like a book of paintings because of the way that it, like, you can't really close it all the way because you just see like crinkled edges. So that's my only thing with those that I kind of get a little nervous about when I see is if it's gonna lay flat. Because sometimes that's the hard thing. I don't know if those kits come with little tape that you can do. Sometimes they can. Depends on the kit. But we have like a few different asynchronous kits. Like one of the kits that we're going to have soon is a sewing kit, which I also did, which is coincidence, kind of, that I'm in here talking about. But the sewing kit that we have available teaches you a few hand stitching, which I feel like everybody, it's weird how you don't realize that you need like a hand sewing skill until like your buttons fall off of like your jacket or something and you're like, oh no. It's very helpful to have. And then of course, like I said before, I'm in the makerspace. That is my main kind of area that I'm associated with. So we have other things associated in there too. So for instance, we got like 3D printing. we have hand embroidery, so we also do an embroidery workshop. So if you've ever wanted to learn how to hand embroidery, we can teach you how to do something like that. Or if you're ever interested in learning something like, whatchamacallit, sewing, like using a sewing machine itself, we can teach you how to use a sewing machine. We have two different kinds. We have a Bernina, and we have a Genome sewing machine. We don't really have any paint beyond the painting kits, just because sometimes those are tricky to have in the makerspace. But you're welcome to ask us questions about them. And so you can even tell, like even in this one section right here, I am using a combination of like water and also dry on dry. And you can even tell that it's like a little bit different. So if I wanted to, I could completely shift the way this one's working. I am being a little bit careful about this because going back to what I said before about color theory. Notice that what I have right next to it is yellow. So I know yellow is still wet on here. It should dry relatively quickly, which is nice. But I'm being a little bit careful towards the edge. Reason being is if I mix these two a little bit too much, I'm going to end up with green. So this section's going to just have like a green outline for no reason, which might come off a little bit strange. So you just want to be a little bit careful when you are doing that. There we go. I could do this next one though, a little more. We can try this one like wet, on a wet actually. So I'm going to wet this plain brush, and let's actually do it right here. So my water is actually a little blue, so I'm going to put some water down so we can see exactly like how different this section's going to be compared to the rest. I'm being careful though, still, just because yellow's right nearby. And see like what just happened right there where like it's starting to go a little bit green because I just touched it lightly. Granted, even just doing something like this, so there's a little blue on here that's happening right now. This almost kind of looks like a water color effect. I'm going to go over it with more blue, so it's not going to look exactly the same. Cool. All right. So obviously these two blues are completely separate now. So I've been wanting to do this entire bowl so that way, right now it looks kind of like more pop arty. So if I want to do this completely light, I totally can just by introducing water, which is pretty cool to think about, like the different effects that you can make. So it's kind of fun when like people pick up this kit because they're like, mine turned out like this, which looks nothing like yours. And I'm like, that's totally fine. Ooh, and this is fun. I love it when it's wet on wet like this, just because I can go like this. And if I wanted to use the way the paint spreads, just to almost kind of create different dimensions and like different effects with it. So see how cool that kind of looks? And this looks completely different from that. So I could even do that. I could even change the colors a little bit if I wanted to. So let's say I wanted to do more of a teal blue in some of these sections. I could do that. At the end of the day, it's your kit. You can do whatever you want with it. No one's going to stop you. We also made sure to give you guys plenty of paint in these, which is really nice. There. Right underneath with the eye. Cool. Yeah, so even just in this one strip, which is all the same color of blue, it just shifted just slightly, which is rather pretty. I like it. All right, let's see the different blue sections. So I have another blue here. So I'm just gonna go in lightly with this. And I personally, I will say for the larger areas, I'm going to use the bigger brush. But I'm fine just using this brush right here that has this nice little pointed tip for me. I don't really need to use a different one. I mean, I could. I think that's the hard thing sometimes when you're looking for paint brushes, is trying to figure out which one's going to work well for you in all the different ways. That could... I think that's a... yeah, that's a 6 right there. So 6 is black. We can go ahead and do that. Painting is just nice. I think there's I don't know if it's still, I mean, I always think it's popular, but I remember in the early days of the pandemic, a lot of people were watching whatchamacallit, Bob Ross paint a lot, just because sometimes it's like a soothing thing just to watch, just to see someone paint. Granted, I remember watching those and then like hearing all the, what was it, things about him. So for instance, I think he's rather soft-spoken because he used to work in the army, if I remember correctly, was the thing that I read. Something like that. And so when he became like a painter, he wanted to always speak softly. I don't know if anyone's watched it recently too. He would also have like little animals in his pockets, which are really cute. But sometimes he would watch that, and sometimes people would follow along. And I don't know of too many people who have recently tried to follow along with that. But he would have different colors. He would also have like different effects that you could do and different types of techniques. So that's looking pretty good. I actually kind of like this more washed out effect than I necessarily do the absolute blue. Just because it's almost like it looks a little too dark to me personally. So I'm actually kind of very happy with this lighter shade of blue that I have going on here. And this is just from me adding just a tiny bit more water to it. I have this going on. We do have some, sometimes some fun workshops though. You know, I don't think we have actually, we don't have a painting one, but on April 6th, we are having, through Making Space, we're having a talk at 4 o'clock in the Fishbowl Forum for River Takata, who's a textile artist in Durham. She's very lovely. She does a lot of really cool things. She does things like ice dyeing for like tie-dye. She does mindful mendings with Slashko thread. And she will be doing a talk for us in the libraries here at NC State next week at 4 p.m. And then I think there's still some spots available. There is a screen printing workshop. If you're part of NC State's community, you can register for. And that's all on the library's website. And that screen printing one should be a cool one because that's using a different kind of paint entirely. More permanent kind. That's intentionally meant to be on your clothing, which is always good. Let's see. I feel like I'm missing the 2. I might have gotten all the blue. Yeah, it looks like I got all the blue. Okay, cool. So I'm going to move to green now. Green, I believe, is 5 on here. I'm actually going to switch which brush I'm using. I'm going to go ahead and use this one. Go back to the dry on dry. Well, kind of. This brush still has some water on it. Just go ahead and have that painted. Just that little edging right there. And you can already tell, like, some of this, like the yellow, it's already dry. And I didn't paint that one too long ago. So like I said, acrylic paint dries very, very quickly. It is a very forgiving medium. I like it a lot. It actually works really well for a lot of different things. So for instance, big popular one, at least that we see a lot in where I work in the makerspace, is when it comes to things like 3D printing. Sometimes people will print things in a filament color that's not what they actually want. They're like, oh, especially if it's like a gift or something. You're like, how do I print this in a different way? Or like, how do I change the color of it? And the answer is oftentimes acrylic paint. It does really good at filling in gaps. It's also helpful because acrylic paint, and this kind of makes sense if you've ever gotten your nails done. Acrylic paint is also a nail polish. And that is actually an alternative that you could use. You could use nail polish because it's acrylic based. Which is actually kind of why you'll have things like acetone, if anyone's used acetone to remove their nail polish. Similar effect sometimes for acrylic paint itself when it comes to the breakdown of it. It's just really weird when you think about like how sometimes all these things are somewhat related to each other. That being said, in comparison to some mediums, I think acrylic paint is relatively new. When I say relatively new, I mean like what, a little over 100 years, something like that. It was created by a gentleman, I believe, named Otto, if I remember correctly. Let me see if that's correct. I'm pretty sure his name's Otto. Yeah, Otto Röhm. He was a German chemist, and he was a pharmacist, and he was known for making plexiglass. So the same person who made plexiglass is the same person who made acrylic paint, which is kind of weird to think about. Just like when it comes to like overlap of different things. And it's also like when, I don't know if anyone's ever seen the meme where it's like, the more you know. This is one of those moments, the more you know. Same person who made plexiglass made acrylic paint. Pretty sure he had it patented. Could be wrong about that. I forgot, I don't remember if it was one of those things where it was like an accidental invention. So for instance, when I say accidental, what's an example of it? Ooh, Play-Doh. I'm pretty sure Play-Doh, if I remember correctly, and if I'm wrong about this, please tell me. Pretty sure I'm right though. Play-Doh was usually made for removing scuffs off of a wall, if I remember correctly, and then it turned into like a kid's toy. I could be wrong about that. This is the moment where I ask someone to fact check for me to make sure that I'm not lying on the internet, which is not good. Just try not to lie on the internet. I can check real quick though. Play-Doh. Pretty sure it was made for removing scuffs. Yep, wallpaper cleaner in the 1930s. And then it was marketed in the 1950s. Which is a little bit weird to think about. That turnaround of, hey, you're going to use this for your wallpaper, and now you are going to use this to give to your kids. Granted, I feel like that's most inventions of different things, like soda, stuff like that. This is actually coming out quite nice, if I do say so myself. And it's looking a little bit different than like how my filled in one looks. So if you see that, that's a lot darker. That's totally fine. Where is my 5? I'm actually just washing this out even a little bit more because I'm actually kind of really liking that effect. It also, weirdly enough, helps to paint that section a lot easier. Yeah, I can talk. I have an easier time painting it. So see, just going like that. It's looking really good though. Trying to remember if I have a section that I need to do. There's black, green. My green is 5. This is the moment where you like kind of have to almost play like a hunt of like, where are all my greens? So I see one right here. Ah, there we go. It's right there too. There's a 4, 6, 5, 1. I think I got it all. 5 down here. Yep. Ooh, I did miss some 2s though. That's good to know. I will actually do these dark, so dry on dry. Look at that. The nice thing too is like I don't really need to be cleaning my brush completely as I go in between these. If you've been noticing, that's totally fine. And part of that is because I'm intentionally starting with my lighter colors and going to my darker. It's not necessarily something I have to worry about as much, which is why I always say go lighter first and then you can go with your darker colors. Makes it a lot easier on your end, particularly as you're doing all the things. There we go. Oof. Having like a little bit of like some scattering occurring there, which is totally fine. That sometimes happens. That's it. Look at that. So I think the next color we're ready for is red, and red is 4. There's quite a few areas. So we can try a different effect too. With 4, we can try dry on dry and see how that goes. The reason why I'm doing this right now is I'm kind of trying to squeeze out the water to make sure this is dry, but that's also why it's really helpful to have a little paper nearby that you can go ahead and dab. So let's see. See the contrast. Kind of similar to before when I was working with yellow and blue. Want to be careful here because if you overlap too much, you might end up with purple, which is not necessarily a bad thing. That could actually end up being like a cool sort of color wheel transition piece that you're working on when it comes to yours, because your paint by numbers kit could end up looking like having like cool lines in between it, which is totally fine. Let's do that. I'm actually making this a little bit thicker paint wise. Keep in mind though, like just because I'm making this thicker though, it is going to take it more time to dry, which is the only thing you have to keep in mind with things like this. That being said, this dries very quickly. Like I've only been painting for what? Now 20 minutes. And particularly this like water stuff, I can go like this. It's dry. The blue not so much, so you can even see like timing. So that might affect certain decisions that you make when it comes to painting. You might be like, you know what, I don't have as much time, I need this to paint a little bit quicker. That might affect the different styles or techniques you end up doing with it. So for instance, it almost looks like we're using different mediums too when we are doing this. Like this definitely does read more to me as more watercolor than it was be like say acrylic, which is totally fine. Just popping this up right here. And it's 4, so I see another one right here. Here's a red and black is 6. Yeah. Ooh, missed a 1. Well, 1's white. So the nice thing with this is I'm just going to leave it. I don't need to go over it with white unless what I could do. This is something I sometimes do with intentionally with giving white is one, if you wanted your colors a little bit lighter. So let's say I wanted almost like a pink, I could do that with the white. But if I want to help with like cleanup, especially of some of my areas that are white on here, I could go back over it with the acrylic paint pretty easily. And that helps to help with cleanup. Might take a few coats if it's a little bit of a darker color, but at the same time, it's gonna be just fine. That's the nice thing with acrylic paint. If you think you messed up, you're fine. You just need a little bit more time to work with it. Make it come out in the way that you want. I'm also just kind of looking at this and knowing the minute I start putting my brush in there, that water is going to turn purple. Which is totally fine. Right now it looks like a very interesting, like, ocean sprayed jello-ish kind of color. There we go. There's my wolf right here. Cool. It's coming out pretty good. And then I'm actually gonna combine this a little bit and just alter this real quick. Letting this just dry for a second while I look at it. Yeah, I like the way it's looking. I feel like it's always weird when you paint with red paint, because the contrast of it can be a little bit more intense. But also, red paint is interesting in the way that you gotta have it only in certain rooms, because sometimes people, what is it? Color affecting your mood and like the way you look at things. So if I remember correctly, I could be incorrect about this. It's possible. Red has like a lot of different color connotations. It's a lucky color in certain cultures. I think a lot of people associate it with like sometimes anger, things like that. I know that there's like usually like for like home decorating, there's like a rule of thumb that you should never paint your walls red. Particularly, well, never not paint your walls red, what I mean. But you should avoid painting your walls red in areas that you eat in. So for instance, like your kitchen and stuff, because supposedly it makes you hungrier. Which is really interesting. Versus like if you want to have like your space, like if you want like kind of like more of a calming effect with your room, you want to go for something that's a little bit more muted. So a lot of people actually will recommend painting rooms like blue, because sometimes they'll find it like soothing to do. Which I always find that stuff interesting when you look into like what was that? The theory behind why rooms are painted in such a way. Granted, I think a lot of walls tend to be just like a beige or like a white. Just a very kind of neutral base with it. I'm just continuing this on. And the nice thing is I kind of have like an idea of like how I want this to look, so I can just very quickly make like certain decisions about paint colors, things of that nature. Why do I feel like I'm missing? Oh yeah, I am missing a 4. I was about to say, I was like, I'm not crazy. I know that there's a few more 4s in here that I have not seen just yet. Something that I did miss though, the eyes are 1 and this should be 3, and 3 is my green. So I might alter that after I do my black, just to be a little bit more careful of it. Make that have a little bit more water. There we go. It really does look a little bit more pink. Now I'm like looking at it with the water itself. And I'm looking for a 4. Got one there, got one there, got one there. And I'm looking off to the side at like this print, just so that way I can kind of see it. Make sure I got the areas that I needed to get. Yeah, looks like I did, which means I move on to black. Black can be intimidating when you do it, because as a darker color, it's a little bit harder to get some of the details on. And a lot of the way that the black is done in this particular paint by colors is almost like a line work, so it helps to separate it out. So you can even see that black is giving a little bit of contrast. It's doing almost some defining of the yellow, and it's making the yellow pop just a little bit more where you can see it. That being said, I can also lighten it up too. I'm worried about it, so if I do a little bit of water, there's also another option I can do. So for instance, this part over here needs to be a little black as well. Sometimes getting black can be kind of tricky when you are just combining from colors. That's actually why we have them in the kit. I feel like whenever we're trying to use primary colors to get to other colors, I sometimes have tricky getting to black right away. There's a multitude of reasons for that. But oftentimes I usually end up with, I feel like brown more often I usually end up with than other colors. That's pretty easy. Like I think if you do purple and orange, you get brown pretty easily, if I remember correctly. Do some black over here. There we go. Now there's a little black over here as well. This one's white. Ooh, and this one's black right here. I could also change directions too if I'm like, you know what, maybe instead of the white, I wanted black right here. It's your painting. You can decide all the different ways you want to have it done to make it look how you want it to look. I might actually almost be done with this now I'm thinking about it. Relatively quickly. Have it right here. Yep. I have made some executive decisions that have been a little bit different than the prompt, and that's totally fine. Yeah, so you can see how like even this just looks very different. But I like it. Looks pretty. It's like a bunch of different colors like all the way together. And this entire section, it's gotta be black. So we're gonna go ahead and black little nose. And that come down right here. And then this is supposed to mimic a mouse. I'm just outlining it real quickly. Nice thing of water too, when you are doing something like this, it kind of extends the life of your paint. So let's say you don't have a lot of paint, I can use black water just to help with that. So pulling from the paint that's already there. There we go. I also feel like it helps it be a little bit more fluid. Something else that you could do while painting as well is some people like to keep like a little spray bottle of water with them. Typically if they're trying to keep their painting surface damp for the effect that they're going for. I'm not doing that with this one just because I personally don't think it's necessary for what I'm trying to do. The cool thing about this too is if I wanted to, I could use this lighten out, like washed out look. Granted, this might take some planning and looking at it ahead of time, is I could use that to almost create like shadows and dimensions in my painting. So for instance, let's say if I wanted to almost like cast a shadow, I could alter the way in the thickness of using like dry on like wet on wet and alter the way this looked. So it almost like looks like the wolf could be in shadow too. That's one thing I could definitely do as well. You don't have to do if you don't want to, but it's actually kind of interesting. I can tell on my end. I don't know if you can tell on the camera. Because my water is a rather bright shade of blue, that blue is actually weirdly enough getting into some of the black. So some of the black that I'm currently painting with right now has like almost like a blue-black feel to it, which I'm kind of digging. I kind of like. I just find it very interesting. That's weird. Like I had this was watered out, but I realized as I was twisting my brush just for the motion and the angle of it, that ended up shifting it just slightly, and I was like, what's going on with it? I think I might have gotten all my black. Let's check. The moment where I go and I look at it. Yeah, I think I did. So at this point, like what I could do is just like look for any areas that I missed. So for instance, I know I missed some stuff in the eye, notably right here, that I wanted to make sure I got. What I could also do too is use things like, remember how I said I could go back with my white and use that for the areas that I wanted to be like a little bit brighter. So I could put my white right here. Even if I wanted to, like maybe I look at that and I'm like, you know, I don't really like the eyes being white. I could be like, you know what, I want them like bright blue. I want them to be blue instead. I can make that decision. So see, like that's standing out to me like a lot more. It's actually kind of cool now that I'm looking at it. The thing I was talking about before with like almost like the washed out effect. Seeing it on camera, it kind of looks like almost like there's a shadow going on in this area, and this area is fine. So I'm gonna let that dry a little bit, but that is pretty much it completed. So you see that one? This is technically if I was just using dry on dry, how that would entirely look, which is pretty cool. While this is drying, I'm actually gonna show you one more thing I brought with me, which is painting on a 3D print, which is a process. There's many processes, but it's sometimes referred to as what's called post-processing, which is what you do with your print at the end. Because I have, he's a little broken, but that's okay. We still like him. I have a, if anyone's familiar with Pokemon, I have what's called a Dragonite. They printed out on a Mini 2, a Lulzbot Mini 2 3D printer. And with that, the nice thing with that is it leaves me enough groove area that I can paint on something like that. So I printed out this little guy. You can see him pretty easily. He's printed in white. Unfortunately, I had an error and I accidentally snapped off his little things. So that's why I said that he's broken, but that's okay. I'll fix him. But with something like this, I removed all his support structures, and so he's 3D printed, and he's actually a good base if I wanted to go ahead and do any kind of printing on that or painting on this, which I definitely could. Let me go ahead and just pop this open. I feel like people know what Dragonite is. I always thought of him as like the really friendly, like the friendlier Charmander. And I know that doesn't really make sense because they're not really related or anything. But he's like light orange. I always just thought that he was friendly. Oh, I was just looking at what he looked like, and for some reason Google decided to inform me that he is like 7'3" which is a little bit intimidating. But yeah, so he's mainly has like kind of like an orangey body. So if I wanted to, I can go back to that orange color we did earlier. Hello, orange color. Are you still? You're not active. That's okay. I can make more orange. I'm gonna put this guy down while I create my orange color. Great. So I have that running. I can just pick them up. And normally you would do some kind of prep work of like sanding it down or even spraying down like a primer or something. I'm going to paint directly on it. I've noticed with the Mini 2s, they have an easier time getting paint more directly than say if you printed something off of like a Prusa printer or something like that. I can literally go like that, and look how quickly this guy takes that paint. He's just so happy about it. I was actually doing a thing for a bit where I was printing a bunch of Pokemon. Because I know a really popular one is Bulbasaur. Especially around the holidays, you can have like a... where his little bulb is, you can put like a Christmas tree. You could put a jack-o'-lantern. So I was printing like a few of them, like 3D printing them. And then I was painting them from scratch. And this is just using the same method I was using when I was doing... I paint by numbers, and also just my knowing how acrylic paint works in general. I'm using the same skills now just to transfer that over to a 3D printed object versus a 2D printed object. I'm doing that actually relatively quickly. So as you can see, like that color is coming across pretty well so far. Just painting his tail. And because I even have like some of the water, it's having a good base. Getting that orange color on him. Yeah, see? Just checking what he looks like. Yep, he has orange on the tip of his heels too. And this is actually happening quite quickly. Granted, I would go over, probably do a little bit more detailed color work as well. Just to take a look at him. This is one of those weird things where it's like trying to get into all the crevices. And the brushes that we actually gave in the kit work really well for things like that. Yeah, this one, for the most part, is pretty much dry. I'm looking at it. There are some areas that are still wet. The eyes are wet. This blue was wet. The black that I did last is still wet. But overall, look-wise, it does look really cool. And then, of course, I made my entire paint thing a little bit of a mess. And that's okay. Painting is messy. Like, you can just look at all the paint that is on my hands. Don't think I got any on my clothing, though. And that is a win. Anytime you can avoid getting painting on your clothing, it is a good deal. Let's go ahead and check this guy real quick. But like I said, oftentimes we have these types of workshops that we offer in the library, so if you ever do want to check them out, you're more than welcome to check out the library's homepage, which I can drop in the chat for you all. Yep. Cool. So that is the library's homepage if anybody wants to check that out, or any workshops or upcoming talks that we're doing. So for instance, we have later on today, it will be a free and open one, is a Zoom talk we're having with Walter C. Barnett tonight at 7 p.m. He has done like a lot of really cool things. Walter has has done illustration, brand identity, just a bunch of really cool work. If anybody wants to check that out, that is a Making Space event. And I have that dropped right there. We also, like I said, have a screen printing workshop and talk next week in the libraries. That one's in person, so that one's at 4 p.m. on Wednesday, April 6th. I'm just popping it open, and I'll drop that one in the chat real quick. Where are you? There we go. This is always the moment where my internet is deciding to be a little slow, because that's how that always works. Let's see, and that one has a workshop with it. There we go. That one's going to be interesting because it is going to be screen printing, which is a different type of painting altogether. Different kind of understandings of an art medium too. That one's going to be in our fishbowl forum, so let me go ahead and I will drop that as well. Cool. But otherwise, thank you for watching. I appreciate it. If you have any questions, you're more than welcome to contact the libraries, our Twitch stream, our schedule. You can always check out and see what we have going on. I think our schedule should be up and running, at least for the remainder of the school year. Hope you all are doing well. All the things you're doing. I'm probably going to be continuing to paint my little Dragonite. Oof. He's got some decent color on him now. I'll hold him by his wing so you all can kind of see. He looks probably a little terrifying in there. But you can see kind of like how quickly that was for me to paint. Yeah, thanks for watching. Hope you all are doing well, having a good semester so far. I'm probably going to go ahead and try to close this stream. But if not, if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to drop them in the chat for me. Take care.